I know that we're not alone in the universe because I've met people from other places outside of our world.
Some people actually have something to risk. And I think for me, it just got to the point that I didn't care anymore. I just knew this was something I needed to talk about.
It just disappoints me about humanity that there are people who will ignore the fact that this happens. And more importantly, to myself, for purely personal reasons, that it has happened to me.
You know, we live in a scientific universe. If you can't see or smell or touch or feel it, it's not real.
We're taught to live in a box. We're taught to believe in a box. And anything that goes outside that box is looked upon as weird, as strange.
I would probably laugh, tease, and make fun of it, except that I've experienced it for 50 years. I love many of these beings. I don't consider them alien at all.
Experiences started, as best I can recall, when I was around 4 years old. As I have grown up, there are, I guess, what I would call benchmark experiences, which I have full recollection of. I remember many times laying in my bed at night and sort of looking over to my right, which is where the rest of my room was, and seeing creatures in my room. These sort of humanoid figures made up of light, but it was like lens flare, and they moved around my room, very liquid-like, like fluid. And I remember, like, laying there in bed, totally paralyzed, like literally, like not just scared, but literally paralyzed, and only being able to really move my eyes and watching them. And I was so scared, and I was trying to scream, trying to call for my parents. Coming down from the room was a shaft. On the end of the shaft was this chair, and sitting in the chair was this little girl. She wasn't an alien, and she wasn't a human. I believe she was a hybrid. And she made eye contact with me, and that exact moment, all of my fear left me. I was completely calmed. I just, oh, wow. And I remember thinking, who are you? Like, what is this? And she did this, she didn't say anything, she just did this gesture, which was really interesting. She put her hand to her head, and then held it out to me. And I looked out, and there were just stars. Just tons of stars. It was so beautiful. As if I was in deep space. It was like snow. All I could see were stars. And I saw a little, like a galaxy. I just felt so connected to her. I always think of her, like if I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about the aliens, which is often, I think if I were to roll over and there were like 3 aliens standing there, that might take me aback, and I might think, oh, okay, what are you going to do? But if she was standing there, it would just be like, hold on, let me get my stuff. You know, I would just be like, ready to go.
My experience with extraterrestrials has not been the Hollywood stereotype. It has its moments when it's this sudden, surprising experience that makes you wonder what happened. And sometimes there's a scary component there, but when you get a handle on it, it's not that frightening at all. It was the strangest experience I recall having as a child because it was in the daytime. I was walking home from kindergarten with a classmate, and We were surrounded by what I thought were little people. They looked like little girls, but the strange thing is they all looked alike. They took me to this place, and I met these grays. There were a variety of grays, different colors, anywhere from brown to gray to this funny kind of yellowish color. Thin, very pasty looking, and they were just there for me to meet them. They weren't threatening in any way. They were very friendly, in fact. It felt like a party, which was very strange. And the last thing I remember was coming through the doorway and waving goodbye to my newfound friends, and I started heading home. And then I saw my mom running out of the house, and she was really upset, and I was ready to tell her what happened, and she was so upset she spanked me, and she had told me I'd been gone for 4 hours, and I didn't realize I'd been gone that long. I remember lying in bed and swearing to myself that I would never forget this incident.
Since it happened to me so early in life, I didn't know that it was unusual. You know, you think that everybody has these types of things happen. A being comes in and visits me at 2 years old, at 4 years old. You think this is what happens. This is normal. This is natural. This is life. There was a time when I was 7 years old where I was taken by them, and the sort of silvery gray entity said to look into his eyes. As I looked into his eyes, they flared up a bright cerulean blue, just a bright sky blue. And I just got absolutely lost into these gorgeous blue eyes, just completely sucked into them. And it was just this tranquil, warm feeling just washing over me, and it was just wonderful. They had a much different rapport with me back then. It seemed that they wanted to communicate with me as a child communicates with another child. There wasn't a feeling that they were over me in any way. They wanted to invite me to do things. They wanted to be my friend. They portrayed themselves as my friends.
Someone can come into your room at night with all the locks on it, walk in through the door, exit through the window. That's incredible. It's quiet. They came right in, not through a ship, but just came right in through the window. There were 3 beings here with really oversized heads. Did not see their features, but I saw it very vividly. I probably had other encounters as a kid that were either blocked out by screen memories or just plain fear.
My first experience with non-terrestrials happened in 1951 when I was 7 years old. I was awakened in the middle of the night and by someone calling my name. And at that time I felt compelled to go downstairs because I knew that they were around my house. I went right to the front door, opened it wide, and there, to my amazement, was a very tall being. He was accompanied by 5 or 6 very small beings. He spoke to me telepathically and said to me, "Please don't be frightened of us. We have not come to harm you." He stopped and pointed to the sky and asked me to look at the sky. And as I looked up, the sky became just an ominous blood red and began to feel like it was going to crack open like a delicate eggshell at any time. But the colors were more see-through. It was almost like a 4th dimensional place. The sky was so ominous that I became very frightened, and I knew that time for humanity, even at age 7, I knew that time was running out. Something was going to happen. The being told me that there may come a time within my lifetime where it would be necessary for them to come and remove some of the population from planet Earth until it was safe to return. They said, if you see the sky as we showed you, you will know we are coming. There will be no time to make a decision whether you will go with us or not. But you need to think about this over your lifetime. That was my first encounter with non-terrestrials. At 7 years old, I knew that my life would never be the same.
I had quite a few experiences when I was young. As a matter of fact, they started when I was young. And my earliest recollection of my first experience was at the age of 6 over at my grandmother's house. I'm up on the porch and I noticed 2 strange looking kids floating toward me. They did not walk, they came floating toward me. I could hear them talk, but they didn't move their mouth. And this is all very strange to a 6-year-old. And so they wanted me to go with them, and I told them I couldn't because my mama told me not to ever leave the yard. And but they said it would be all right. And for some reason, after they said that, I said, okay, I'll go with you. And I don't know how I got inside, but the next thing I knew, I was inside. And I go over to this table, and there's some toys on it. The first toy I pick up is a round silver ball. All I had to do was just think of where I wanted it to go. And I would start flying it around the room, just like that. It was so cool. I trusted these beings because I was having fun with them. After playing with those toys, I was on the front sidewalk of my grandmother's house. I don't know how I got there. I don't know when I got there. And there was this round silver airplane, and I was waving goodbye. When I would tell my parents or my grandparents if it happened over at their house, it did not feel good. And here I am telling the truth, and these beings, these strange-looking creatures are coming in my room and taking me out at night, and I want to tell someone about this, and I do. And the next thing I know is that they're telling me that I'm wrong, and I know it's right because it's happening.
The difficulty at that time in saying, you know, this is what happened to me, but I can't prove it. Too bad you weren't there. Too bad this doesn't happen to so many people. Made me feel the urge to clam up for the longest time. And then it started to be a real difficult situation. Who can I trust to tell these things to as they continued to happen?
People that talk about their experiences tend to be made fun of. And I didn't want to be made fun of. I didn't think that that was the right reaction for a lot of this, for a lot of these experiences that I was having, because I knew I wasn't crazy.
And when I would speak about it to certain people, they would give me one of these, you know, raised eyebrow looks, like they didn't know what I was talking about. So I learned very quickly, if you wanted to have friends and you wanted to fit in, that you didn't talk about these things.
I must tell you, even to this day, though, if I'm home alone, so I keep the lights on as long as I possibly can before I go to sleep. I do that. I'm 44 years old. One night, I had an experience where I was lying in bed, and all of a sudden, the room was filled with this white, it was almost daylight. And there was a being on the edge of the bed with the pear-shaped head and the wraparound eyes. My heart was racing, and I was like, what? And I pulled the covers up over my head. That's what I did. And I felt this like whirlwind. Whoosh. I pulled the covers down and it was gone. It was like nothing ever happened. It was just an eerie quiet. It was a rough time for a while. My ex-wife, my wife at the time, she walked with me through it, but I knew it had to be, for her, you know, it had to be some stressful. I mean, of course I wouldn't be lying about this, but here it is that, you know, your partner's saying that beings from another place are coming and strange things are happening. And I'm sure it was interesting, to say the least.
My experiences up and through my early teen years were all very friendly, playful with them. Then as I got into my teen years, especially when I hit puberty, then it got really scary. They would shine a bright light, say, on my knee or my chest, and I would have very little idea of what they were doing, and they would not explain to me at all. I can't say I felt a great deal of pain, just humiliation that I would be laying there without clothes as they examined me repeatedly, regularly. They brought me in front of an entity that I believe that most people aren't meant to see because of how horrifying they are and how oppressive they appear, but in certain circumstances I feel that they need to bring people in front of this sort of higher authority being, which looks like a giant insect or a praying mantis. I was just absolutely terrified. Just had this piercing stare, just made me feel like dust sitting in the chair, just completely powerful. He had expressed to me this awesome displeasure that I was not going along with what they wanted to go along with. And the basic message was, just go along. I was obviously terrified of the experience. It was overwhelming. And for days after the experience, I was just dumbfounded. And I would spend the whole day afraid to go to bed at night. And I would try to sleep as much during the daytime. I would sleep when I got home from school, sleep in the short hours after dinner, just so I would be able to stay up later at night, so I wouldn't have to face them again.
It is a very scary thing to think that a being that was not from this earth, and God only knows from where, showed up in my bedroom or showed up in my living room and wanted to poke needles in me or do some horrendous thing. Terrifying. It's terrifying. And I would hope that no one would have those experiences. I have had those experiences. I would never want to repeat them again. I found myself upstairs in my bedroom listening to this horribly loud noise. And it frightened me so much, and I went downstairs, and I thought I was going to open that front door and run like hell. But when I got downstairs, my dog was plastered up against the front door like she was paralyzed. She couldn't move. And this horribly loud sound was coming from the back of the house where the kitchen was. And so I inched my way back there, and to my amazement, 3 or 4 beings tried to drag me and take me physically. This was happening on a nightly basis. They were in my room, they were in my house, and I said, no, you are not going to do this. I'm not going. And in a big booming voice, the entity said to me, as you respect yourself, so shall we. And he was gone. And from that day on, I learned that I was not a victim. But I went through some pretty scary stuff.
As I have grown up, there are, I guess, what I would call benchmark experiences, which I have full recollection of. And I suspect that there are many experiences in between those, which I have partial recollection of or none whatsoever. They started with me feeling very scared, being taken out of my room, brought to another place, and it was a very physical experience and very terrifying for me. I got the impression that I was on a craft. To my right were these, what I called doctors, because I didn't know what else to call them. I looked at them and they were standing next to this examination table with these devices next to it. At that point, the doctor on my left came around and he had an instrument in his hand with a big, like, needle, and opened my mouth with one of his hands, and the other one put this thing in my mouth, and it went way back, way deep into my jaw, and it pressed against, I think it pressed against a tooth of mine, really hard, and it didn't hurt, but I could feel a lot of pressure. I thought, okay, I don't know what that was, and then he had this device that had these needles and things sticking out, like just a few of them, and he put it onto my ear, and it made like a suction, like a vacuum around my ear, and just went and stuck there, and I felt this thing press slowly into my ear, like it was a needle, and it went deep into my head. I could feel it in there. I looked at him and I shot them this thought of, like, you take me home. He looked at me just really firmly in the eyes, and he said to me, "Don't be afraid, and I want you to remember tomorrow, the next day, forever, that what you experienced tonight was really important, very important." What they're doing, I can't say for certain, but I suspect that it's learning. Much like we go out into the wild and take a wildcat into our labs and we tag them and we do all kinds of samples and we release them. That's got to be kind of traumatic for the wildcat, but we aren't doing it any harm. And I kind of liken that to my situation.
These beings are constantly studying us. They're throwing scenarios in our heads to see how we react, and they're doing it. They aren't perfect, but they are darn good at what they do. And when they introduce you, they're saying, okay, here's a little piece of candy, but there's an ulterior motive that said, let's see how you react so we can learn your emotions a little bit better in this scenario. So it's one scenario after another, a never-ending scenario.
It's like going through school. These experiences are like part of going through school for me. And it's about just graduating to that next level of understanding about how the universe functions and, you know, what's out there.
That little box that you think life fits in just is shredded, and you think that you are entirely vulnerable to anything, that anything is possible in the world, and that life is just as unusual as you would allow it to be, as you could imagine it to be. It's a feeling of being completely adrift with no stability, no anchor whatsoever.
Some of the feelings that come up for me afterwards, because we talked about the fear, and that's always initially there because of the high strangeness of it. No matter how beneficent it is, there's still that fear. But there's a sadness because it's almost as if some friends of mine have gone away, and I don't know when I'm going to see them again. One night, I was lying in bed, and all of a sudden, I couldn't move, and I felt something stuck in the back of my head, and it hurt. And I screamed, and Sandy woke up and said, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I said, "Something stuck me in the back of my head." I said, "It's them. They were here. They were here." You know, and it scared her. It really, really scared her. So I told them. And I remember because I used to keep a little golf club. I don't play golf. It was a golf club. And I remember picking it up and opening up the blinds and yelling at the top of my lungs, "You're scaring my family. You can't do that." And she says, "I remember you in your underwear on 81st Street on the 15th floor staring out." About a month or so later, I'm home. I'm getting ready to go to bed. I'm getting ready to go to bed, and I lie down, and I feel I can't move. And this time I can't even open my eyes, but I'm awake. In my mind's eye is a syringe. I felt the most gentlest prick in the top of my crown. And then that was it. But what I noticed this time is that he touched my hand, my left hand, and patted my head. That I will always remember. That I will always remember. Like a friend.
Suddenly, there was light being cast down onto the driveway. I got a little nervous, and right then I felt this presence behind me. All the hair stood up on my body, and I thought, oh no. I turned around to look, and out from behind the camper stepped this little girl I had seen from my other encounter when I was 4, only she wasn't a little girl, she was my age. And the second I saw her, totally relaxed. Again, exactly the same as my last experience. And tons of emotions were just running through my mind, and it was just so magical. And I remember just feeling this amazing amount of love, like, you know, like sisterly love, like sort of thing. And I just felt so connected to her. I wanted this moment to last forever. And she put her hand on my shoulder and ran her hand down my arm. And in those few seconds that it took her to trail down my arm, I sort of went into this trance state. And she was holding my arm, and I was kind of looking at her, and everything was kind of fuzzy, and I was really happy, and like, okay. And she turned me towards the door to the camper, and I thought, okay, I'm going there. The lights came on, the TV went to static, and I looked over at my friend, and we heard this wah 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 from above, and it startled us. And I remember, like, whoa, what was that? Kind of getting back into that mode, and then all of a sudden, that mode just sort of slipped away somehow, and I just was really relaxed again. And I looked at him and I said, "So should we go to sleep?" And he said, "Yeah." And he just reached over and turned off the TV and turned off the lights, and we just went to sleep. This experience was monumental to me because she came and connected with me again. And simply her presence makes me feel as if there is no wrong in the universe. And that's why it was monumental, simply because I had that feeling, even though it was fleeting.
Some of the extraterrestrial races are creating hybrid children. They are creating a hybrid race. They are combining the genetics of humans and extraterrestrials. I was shown a child that was about 6 years old. She was very humanoid looking. Actually, she had freckles, which I thought was very distinctive and very odd. And my first thought was, oh, you're a little chubby, and my Earth children were very thin at your age, and I know you're my child, but you have freckles. She knew who I was. She didn't show very much emotion. I had a very loving feeling toward her. I sent her love all the time, a mother's love that she probably doesn't realize that I have sent to her. As a mother, I knew I could never take her home, but I was very grateful for her existence and for the fact that she was very content with her life And she wanted me to know that, and that was the purpose for the visit. I haven't seen her again, but I know that I still send her love all the time. I think that they're creating these children in case we blow ourselves off this planet or pollute ourselves off this planet. Maybe they're creating bodies that can survive on planets that are very different from the Earth.
I had an experience when I was 23, which I remembered the next day, almost entirely in its full. I remember sort of floating up out of my position in the bed and rolling over on the fingertips of these aliens. They floated me out of the bedroom, through the kitchen, and down the hallway and out the door. Out from the wall, across from me, came this device with a hose attached to it. It just sort of floated out. And one guy picked it up, and there it was, coming up here kind of between my legs, and I was naked, and I thought, oh, I don't know about this. And I looked at the guy, and I told him, you know, again, I am not talking, but I told him, are you going to do what I think you're going to do? And he said, yeah. And I said, all right, okay, do it, you know. And they attached this device between my legs, like they didn't have to get me aroused or anything. It was just sort of like going to the doctor and peeing in a cup, you know. Maybe they took a urine sample as well, or only a urine sample, but they took some sample. And I remember just sort of feeling some fluids leaving my body, but not feeling anything else, just sort of sitting there and waiting, and that was it. And this thing went away and into the wall. They floated me back into the room and laid me down on the bed. And I don't know how long it lasted, probably not long. So I think that there's maybe a hybrid sort of project going on. And I think that that could be because they're dying, or that could be because they want to come to Earth and be able to walk around and live. And maybe their bodies are too fragile to do that right now, so they need to kind of, you know, become a bit of both.
I knew in an instant that it was my son, and I felt very good because I knew that I would be allowed to touch him. And he actually put his arms around me first, and I put my arms around him, and we just held each other. And we held each other for what seemed like a long time, but in actuality it was probably just a few seconds. And I could feel, even though he didn't say anything, I could feel this love for him because he knew that I was his father. The tall female gray came over and said I had to go. I did not want to leave, but I didn't have any choice because the next thing I knew, I was back in my bedroom, standing up in the middle of the room, and I was crying. For a solid week, I went around just with this great depression because I have 3 regular children, and even though I'm divorced, I can call them up and see them anytime I want to. And that's the greatest feeling for a parent. After this experience, I told my wife, and it was so comforting knowing that even though she did not understand, she wasn't telling me that it was my imagination, it wasn't my fantasy. Finally, here was someone that I loved, that was close to me, that was telling me, that was letting me know and showing me that they weren't thinking that I was lying or that I was crazy. I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm here to help you through it. A human cannot give me the pain, emotionally or physically, that these beings have done to me. It's hard enough surviving the human reality, but you can't be weak surviving the human reality and the alien reality. You gotta be strong. and it's my friends, the ones who I owe my sanity to, and my wife and my family who've supported me. It's been a blessing because I've opened my eyes to new realities. I no longer look at life strictly from a human perspective. I'm looking at it from their perspective too. My view of life has extended past this earth into the universe. I do not credit the beings for the blessing. I can credit the human race for the blessing. When I cried, it was a human that comforted me. It's a human I share with. It's a human that's exploring this, not the beings at all.
I had grown up feeling a great deal of terror and a great deal of actual victimization from my experiences. Being taken by them and not knowing what was going to happen. A lot of times I thought, is this it? Is this the end of my life? What are they going to do? What's going on here? I came to a point and a realization that I am now in touch with something that's greater, larger than my old world that I had once known. And to say that I really, truly, ultimately understand a lot of what they do, I can't say that. But I feel much more comfortable about it.
My first husband was quite fearful of what was happening. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want me to talk about it. He didn't want any of this to happen. It was during those years of raising my children and trying to be a normal working part-time mom and trying to keep a marriage together. And in the meantime, having all these encounters, it was a very difficult time in my life. Very difficult time. When I first met my second husband, I knew that I had to tell him who I was because I would not go through another marriage where I felt stifled and where there was fear about this. We had talked about getting married, and he said to me, "Is there anything that I should know about you before we get married? I don't like surprises." And I said, "Well, not much, except that I encounter UFOs and I've been abducted by aliens." And he looked at me and he said, "That's really interesting. I'd like to hear more about that." So he was very open to it. He'll tell you that he doesn't understand all of it, but he gives me the freedom to be who I am, and that's all I ask. And I love him dearly because of that. But he gives me the freedom to be who I am, and that's all I ask. And I love him dearly because of that. I look at my life, and I just can't imagine not having these experiences and not being so connected with other parts of the universe now. I'm very, very grateful for my experiences. I wouldn't change anything. It's made me a better person.
One of the interesting things that happened to me when the experiences started happening when I was an adult again was it actually took me out of my shell. I was very shy before that. I was a lot more quiet. So it helped me break through that. And I think that's what the ETs are here for, is to help us grow and develop and find out who we are and take responsibility for the kind of lives that we're leading in this life. Because I think we're really making quite a mess of the world as it is, and I think that they can see what we're doing very much like a neighbor who can see how much trash we're throwing out in our yard, and yet we don't see it ourselves, and yet they have to look at it. I think that they feel that they have to say something before we just totally bury ourselves in our own garbage.
You can't even fathom how big this universe is and what's going on out here. It's like the T-shirt you see with the solar system, and they have a little arrow that says you are here, and the Earth is just like a pebble and many grains of sand. It's humbling. It's awe-inspiring. It's fantastic. I don't know their agenda on coming to see me, other than to at least help me to say, search who you really are. Broaden your horizon, and then take that out in the world. I know that what has happened is I have used my life to serve others in a more intentional way since I've been visited. I could have gone to my grave like Rolly Loman does in Death of a Salesman, thinking I have to be a success by how much I sell or how much I do, and not knowing who I was. I could have done that like so many people do. Thoreau says most people live lives of quiet desperation. Well, he was on something.
These experiences have overall been a very positive thing for me. One of my favorite positives is that I have interacted with this other culture. That exchange between two beings who are finding out something about each other. And that is just amazing for me, because when I look into the eyes of these creatures, a whole new world is opened up, and it's really exhilarating. The best way I see to go about things in the future is to become the best human being I can possibly be, because that is my charge. I feel like I have been made aware of my own sort of presence in this universe, and I have to play my role, which is that of a human being living on Earth.